Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Mike. I'm out in the middle of Texas, northern Texas right now, and I'm in the vehicle. We're in the Sprinter van, and we're headed back to Prescott, Arizona, coming from the Sawmill Training Center / complex up in Lawrence, South Carolina. I should say down in Lawrence, South Carolina. We had a really good time. Big shout out to Scott. Thanks for hosting us and all the hospitality. I think that weekend, or this last weekend, we trained over 130 students in 3 different states, 7 different courses. It was an amazing opportunity for us to get out and train new people. And we appreciate you guys that are coming to train and staying tuned into all this content. I want to do this video on the road because it's been weighing on my mind. I know a lot of guys who have been tuned into the YouTube channel have been getting basic information about gun handling, safety, because you've never seen it before, or you're just trying to refresh your skill sets. I decided on this video to put it on my personal YouTube, but also IGTV, but I decided to turn off the comments on YouTube. The reason being, I don't like trolls, and they just bother me. Unnecessary comments as related to the content. If it's not providing constructive criticism, then there's no point in it, and I'm tired of giving trolls and attention whores who want a platform. So I'm going to turn that off and disable that, which doesn't mean I don't appreciate you, because I do, and it doesn't mean I don't want to engage with you. I do. But what I'm going to do is, if you're interested in this video and you want to send me feedback, criticisms, or comments, maybe even questions, hit me up at mike.a.glover, which is my personal Instagram. You can DM me. I check all my DMs personally, and I answer the majority of them. Even if you're a troll and you have the balls to get on there and message me, hit me up. If you have a problem with what I'm doing, feel free to criticize and micromanage the content. Hey guys, so the shot process is pretty complex. I've learned the shot process over time, and that's taken me over 20 years to kind of figure out and develop my own way of teaching it. What is the shot process is probably what you're asking yourself right now. If you're new to guns, or maybe you're not even new to guns, what the shot process is the mental process that takes place being physically translated while you acquire and engage a threat. And what I mean is, there's a couple shot processes that take place depending on time. Time is the differentiation between marksmanship and tactical, but we need to understand how that process works, how my eyes work, how my hands work, how my brain works, to really dial it in. What I see a lot of people do on ranges, we've had thousands of students come through training over the years at Fieldcraft Survival. What I see a lot of people doing is, what they do is they get on a range and they shoot, and then they're not consciously attached or plug in, and then they don't understand what's taking place. They're just going through the motions. That's really dangerous in survival, because when you're reacting to a threat and you're in this kind of autopilot phase, or of transitioning from being cognitive or being aware to fight, flight, or freeze, it's very difficult to capture information and to stay conscious, which for me means stay focused. And so what happens is, you shoot, you do whatever you do, and then on the back end, when reflecting on that, you don't have a lot of information stored in your head, or in training, you don't have a lot of reference for what you should improve. You kind of just went through the motions. There's a difference between marksmanship, right? The principles or fundamentals of marksmanship and combat pistol / self-defense. The difference, again, varies in the time that you have versus the time you don't have. So when I lay this out in context, I want you to understand what marksmanship is. One of the most important fundamentals of marksmanship that apply to what I'm talking about is follow through. Because the way our brains work is, if we don't have a process on the back end of something, like I ask you to shoot, and you just shoot. And then I say, well, what did you see? And the answer is, well, I didn't see much. Because when the gun goes boom, you have a flinch response, and you're in a fight or flight zone. We'll call it a zone because you're not quite there, but you're elevated. You know, you have adrenaline pumping through your body because you're a little nervous, and that's one of the reasons we flinch. Well, if I told you to do something that required cognition, meaning I required you to think on the back end of something that scares you or puts you in a fight or flight mode, you would think about that thing you had to do on the back end, and which we would call follow through, and you would not potentially flinch, fight, or freeze. The reason it works that way is because you're conscious. When we're not conscious, we are not really cognitive. We're not self-aware. We're not paying attention to our environment. We don't have great situational awareness, which lends itself to bad decision making. So you're in the woods, you walk along, and you run into a snake. Well, your threat response is you jump back because you're like, oh crap, there's a snake. That might be ingrained genetically, it might be past experiences, but you react. In that reaction mode or that time in which you flinched, you're not super cognitive. You're not thinking about much. But the difference between threat and the difference between fear is contemplating the threat. So we're emotional creatures, right? That's what separates us really from all other primates, is we're super emotional, and we have fear where we contemplate impending doom. So we overanalyze something because we're thinking about it, and that puts us in another category of not being situationally aware or not really adaptive to our environments, which could lead to more issues. So my overall objective in this discussion is to make you understand the process and teach you how to stay in the zone. We'll just call it in the zone. I want you to be in the green zone. I don't want you to be in the red or even the amber zone. All right, so hopefully that explanation worked. I'm kind of spitballing here, so if you have to rewind this and take the time to digest things, I hope you do. So let's say, for example, you're walking down the hallway because you hear a noise in your house. There's no gun involved. And you hear a noise that's coming from your child's bedroom. And you look inside your child's bedroom and you see a dark, shadowy figure. Well, inside that bedroom, there's a man standing over your child's crib. How would you react? Well, if it surprised you, and the word surprise is just a really good indication of what's happening neurologically, even physically, you're going to immediately potentially go into a fight, flight, or freeze mode, right? Your hypothalamus activates your sympathetic nervous system, you overreact, maybe even underreact, and a whole bunch of things happen. Cortisol, which leads to cortisone, adrenaline. Some of these stress hormones affect you neurologically, physiologically, and you might not be cognitive or aware of what's happening. You might go, oh crap, and you gasp, and then you run away, or you immediately start swinging. You ever been scared by somebody and your first response is you just throw a punch in the air? That's kind of the way the process works. Or you scare somebody and they cower because they ball up or they run. That survival, primitive, ancestral instinct to survive is just part of our DNA. The problem in that is it's designed to allow you to survive in a primitive environment, typically austere. You're walking around the woods, you hear something, you freeze. You see something, and then you make a decision and you potentially see a cat, a mountain lion come out of the wood line, and then you run. Or it's too late, you can't run, and then you immediately start fighting. You're not using a lot of brain power there. Before I segue into the discussion, let me explain something on the way your brain processes this. I explain it via a term called tidbits. The synapses are just ways in which your brain delivers messages to allow your body to activate in cognitive responses, decision making. So imagine a synapsis is this and this, and together when meshed, they send signals to each other. Well, that message and delivery system is called a tidbit. Your brain can only process so many of those tidbits. So as those tidbits are processing information, we look at that as capacity. overall capacity. So let's say you have a capacity of 100% in your headspace, between your two ears, your brain. Well, when you're in a conversation, for example, you're using about 60% of that said capacity. Because if you're conversing with somebody, you're reading their body language, their lips, potentially you're listening to verbal cues. You might even be looking into your own head to come up with crooked responses. You're analyzing that information, and that takes 60% of your overall capacity. That obviously allows 40% of your capacity to be freed up. But that's why you're able to retain situational awareness. You're able to see the pretty girl coming through the door. You're able to hear your buddy at the bar talking crap about you. That those things are lending themselves to being able to adapt in that environment by being ahead offensively. So you can see easily how under stress that capacity either shrinks or whatever you're doing stretches. So let's say you're doing a task like, I don't know, axing wood. You're taking a hatchet and you're trying to split wood in the middle of the woods. You hear something that sounds like a mountain lion or a bear crashing through the woods. That stress, which suppresses that capacity, is going to stretch that cognitive ability for you to split wood. So then you're not going to be able to do it. You might shake, you might quiver, you might not be able to concentrate and focus. And so it's pinging that red line. It's like the red line in a vehicle where you're hitting that red line and it's outrunning the capability of the vehicle. On the outside of that capacity, let's say 110% in, that's where you see the bad decision making. That's where you see the mistakes. I talk about it in survival. That's like the guy who's on a second floor building in an apartment complex, and he freaks out and he runs to the third floor instead of running down to the first floor and then to the ground. He runs to the third floor and he jumps off, forgetting that it's a 30, 40 plus foot drop, and he lands on his head, right? Because he's stressed. He's tapped out on his overall capacity to process information. That's a way to understand how this works in your head. That under stress, your capacity isn't what it is. It's everything is amplified when you're suppressing stress. So you take any technical skill set like shooting a gun on a flat range with no stress. The reason we do stress shoots or culmination exercises is because when you do that, you're practicing technical skill sets, I think more validating technical skill sets, while you're suppressing everything with stress, which emulates a real world stressful situation. That could be a disaster, man-made or natural. And that's a good indication of where you're really at. Because anybody could shoot, that's why I make fun of Instagram influencers, right? Anybody could shoot a gun technically proficiently while running around with a camera on them after they've rehearsed it a couple times, or even without rehearsal, with no stress. But you take those same people and you induce stress. Let's say your favorite Instagram tactical influencer runs a gauntlet of targets and he's shooting paper still and he looks real dynamic and really cool. Well, let's say you make him do 50 pull-ups. Well, he can't do 50 pull-ups. So he has to physically stress his body to do that. And then you make that guy do 50 burpees, but he's not physically fit. And then when he gets up from that, his stress, or, as we measure it in beats per minute, his heart rate is elevated. That's going to induce physical and psychological stress, which is going to suppress his technical capabilities, not typically under stress. Everybody's a gunfighter with no stress. Everybody's a badass until you get punched in the face. That's where that comes from, right? So the reality is, if you understand the process, if you understand the way in which your brain and your body works, then you can fine tune and adapt to be better at that. So let's talk about how the eyes work in relationship to the hands. One of the things that I teach is to emphasize the physical body over the gun. Like I have a pistol here. This is a Triarch Systems Glock 17 Charlie. I'll put the link in the bottom so you guys can check them out. One of my favorite custom pistol manufacturers. They make mediocre gun's really great. This is a Glock 17. Charlie, under normal circumstances, would be a mediocre gun because they've done some different things to this. It's a really great gun. I'm going to do a 3-point check on this to make sure it's clear. Inside the barrel, inside the mag well, inside the bolt face. I'm going to let it slide forward or drop the slide, and then I'm going to pull it back to the rear and make sure it's good. Okay, so I have this gun, it's safe in my hands. So I have this pistol, and when you hold this pistol in your hand, you have sights. Right? That's the way in which you aim. You have a front sight and a rear sight. So the understanding for most people is if I want to shoot a target, or in this case in self-defense, I want to shoot a human being that's a bad guy, I'm going to drive this gun or push this gun or choose whatever term you want in getting in the fight, and then I'm going to look at the front sight in between the rear sight, get a good sight picture, and then break the shot. So if I'm holding the gun, I want you to see something in relationship to my hand. The barrel of this gun is in line with my not only dominant hand, but I'm going to pull on this side, but also my support hand. The thumb is in line how I would grip the pistol. The bore axis of this gun is in line with my thumb. But what you will notice is the sights, which are aligned above this, aren't. So, this is a good example. A rifle is a better example. We call this, the relationship between the sights and the bore is called height over bore. And this is minimal. It's measured probably in millimeters. But if you take a rifle, let's say the rifle sitting with rings and the scope, or the center of the scope, is 1.75 inches. Let's call it 2 inches for the sake of math, above the bore line. Well, you have to take that into consideration. So if you're using the optic to aim to shoot, you have to understand that relationship. Well, the problem in that is when I'm thinking about saving my life in milliseconds, I have to drive my physical body with the gun in my hand. But if I told you the only way you're successful is by finding my front sight, that would be problematic. One, it takes a lot of time to transition your field of view or your focus from eyes to the front sight, which is my finger in this case. It takes a lot of time. That time is I've actually read one case study where it's about 0.3 of a second. That's a lot of time in a gunfight, because if a person's holding a gun pointed at your face and they pull the trigger, that's about 0.2 of a second. So just do the simple math. I'm pointing a gun at you at 0.2 of a second, and you're going to drive and push your gun with the understanding that you're going to find your front sight elevated off your bore line to engage the threat. You would be dead a couple times over. So with the carbine or with the rifle, the same thing applies. But now it's more problematic because I have a higher height over bore from the bore line or barrel to the middle of my optic. So if I told you to drive the gun and find the sight, what you would do is you would look for the sight, right, with your head and your eyes. When you found it, then that would be acquisition, and then you would break the shot after you acquired the target. That takes too much time. So then if I told you the only way to successfully win a gunfight when an immediate threat or somebody's pointing a gun at you is to align the gun and break the trigger in a fair fight, then the understanding would be you wouldn't use the front sight. You would not transition your field of view from your eyeballs to the optic or an EOTech or the front sight, in this case on a pistol. You want to live. But what I always tell people is, despite how I lay that out, you're going to do it anyway. I promise you. If somebody's pointing a gun at you and you have a gun in your waistband, or you have a gun at the high ready because you're walking down your hallway anticipating a threat, and you see a threat, are you going to wait to push your gun for your eye to transition to the front sight from the target and then break the shot? You're not. You won't, because you want to live. That's the bottom line. And partly because you want to live, but also deliberately because the flinch response of reacting to a threat cognitively, meaning in the moment, is doing something with action, which is like breaking a trigger. Your flinch response in a situation where you run into somebody who's an immediate threat shouldn't be to flinch and break the gun back and go, oh no, and then break the shot. It should be, oh crap, and then you break the shot. Right? That's what I tell people when we're running carbines or pistols and we're practicing a flinch response. that we should practice the presentation from low ready, high ready, whatever ready you want, when we are addressing a threat that where milliseconds count, that our flinch response should be selecting from safe to semi and breaking the shot simultaneously with good alignment. That's key, because that's a fair fight. But we're taught, because we're taught from a baseline of the fundamentals of marksmanship, that you need to do things slow, deliberately, but we don't have the time. I love marksmanship because it's a great foundation. It includes stance, grip, trigger control, front sight alignment, follow through, breathing, and the list goes on. There's multiple tactics that we use in the fundamentals depending on the schoolhouse. A great baseline. Interesting history is the NRA, the National Rifle Association, after the Civil War, I believe it was 1867, the Civil War is 1861 to 64, started because of the gap of civilians understanding marksmanship, or how to properly use firearms in defense of their life. So we started teaching marksmanship. But we didn't teach a lot of self-defense. In fact, back then, if you remember, or you even saw the movies, we were using British tactics in the Civil War. We were lining up and literally gunning each other down in open fields with no cover, and definitely without concealment. So when you fast forward 100 plus years, you start to realize that we still do the fundamentals of marksmanship as a baseline understanding. The problem is the fundamentals of marksmanship are not exactly translatable to the fundamentals of gunfighting, or in this case, self-defense. A good example is alignment. If I had to push a gun and get front sight alignment, I would probably get killed, especially with an immediate threat. But if I understood how to point shoot, instinctive shoot, reflexive shoot, then I would be set up for success. I don't know what happened between actually there was a period in the 1800s where cowboy action shooters were doing trick shots where they were using point shooting. But between that time period and then the early 1980s, which is the start point of most SWAT teams in America, because of the Iran hostage circumstance and counterterrorism actions and terrorism actions with hijacked airplanes, etc. We started developing a lot of tactics out of Vietnam. But I don't know what happened between the 80s and 90s and today, where instinctive shooting has been looked at as a liability. And I get it. If I teach a law enforcement agency about instinctive shooting, adaptive shooting, reflexive, whatever you want to call it, most would look at me and say, hey, that's not how we roll. Because in a court of law, if you said, hey, I drew my gun, Mike taught me how to point shoot, I pointed it and shot, and then I didn't kill the hostage, or I didn't kill the bad guy, I shot a hostage, that would be a huge problem in liability. So most institutions teach fundamentals of marksmanship, and then they just ramp up the speed, anticipating that you'll just ramp up the marksmanship being faster. When me and Kevin were in special operations, we would do things like go into a room and clear a point of domination. We would see a target. The target would have a gun. And the way in which I'm laying this story out is literally the speed in which we would probably do it. We see a target in our point of domination, which is our corner of a room. We would see the target and identify hands, because hands is where the threat's going to come from. It's called handgun because that's where you would hold a weapon. I would look at the threat, determine friend or foe. After I've made this decision that he's a foe, a bad guy, a threat to me, I would lift my gun, probably from the high ready. Maybe I have it offset off of my eyes, and find the red dot optic. I would overlay that red dot optic where I wanted to be. If it came up on his chest, I would want to drive it center line exactly where those shots would be, and I would take those shots nice and deliberately. I would accomplish that in the distance in which I came through the threshold until I closed the distance on the target, and then I would collapse my sector. That process, that was our shot process in the military. Most institution shot process is that. A guy's on a range, a police officer's on the range in the academy, and he's standing there, and the officers or the academy officer says, hey guys, we're going to do presentations. You're going to take one shot on the target from 3 yards. but they say you have to do so in less than a second. So they push the gun and they break a shot, and because they want to win, because they said 1 second. And before that, they were teaching, hey guys, what you're going to do is rail the gun, meaning taking the gun from here to the target and find the front sight along the way. And when they found the front sight, they broke the shot safely, acquired with no problem. But that took time. But when we ramped it up, they just broke the shot. But nobody on the range asked the question, what are you seeing visually? What's taking place physiologically? And what's the difference between the two? Well, here we go. When I was in Sephardic, I learned how to shoot pistols. I mean, I knew how to shoot a pistol, but I didn't know how to shoot a pistol proficiently. But I rarely remember ever getting a class on understanding what my eyes were doing. In fact, a lot of my experiences that I'm talking to you about now happened when I was trying to figure things out on my own. Did you know that the best shooters in the world, professional USPSA shooters, which is a competition where people shoot fast on a stage of competition, multiple targets, multiple engagements, or multiple rounds on the engagement? What if I told you that rarely, if ever, do they use their front sight? The question would be, well, then how are they so accurate? Right? That's a valid question. Another question would be, why would they do that? So the reason they're so accurate is because they practice. They practice getting a clear sight picture of the target with an understanding of the representation and the background of their vision, meaning blurry, of the rear and front sight, right? They have alignment. They have target alignment, but they have target focused. Why would they do that? The question is, why would they do that? The answer is because they want to win. If me and you were shooting in a competition and you transition your field of view from target to front sight to ensure you were accurate on a standard IPSC or man-shaped target every time that had a little alpha box in it, and you shot it slow because you transition your field of view from target to front sight, which takes 0.3 of a second each and every time, you would be slow. But if I pushed the same gun and broke the shots but had a solution and accuracy, that would translate to speed. So the question of why is they want to win. That understanding is why you should do it in self-defense. When I talked to Dan Horner on the Fieldcraft Survival Podcast, which if you haven't subscribed to it, please subscribe. It's on iTunes, it's on Shopify. Damn, you like that? Oh my God, I just unbuttoned my shirt. Look at that tan right there. I plan to, I'm going to do is I'm going to tan the outside of my chest so it looks like I have a nice chest. So it defines the outline, but I just need like a thong or a strip, something down like this. Okay. All right, so that's commitment right there. That's range commitment, or the lack of motion, sunblind. So, how do I become better? Sorry, I lost my train of thought. I digress. How do I want to become better at this? Well, I talked to Dan Horner in a podcast because he's a professional shooter. I want to ask the question. I knew the answer, but I want to ask the question for you guys to hear. Dan's been shooting for years. He did, I think, 13 years in the Army Marksmanship unit. He actually trained my detachment when I had a sniper team, intense special forces group in the SIF. I brought them to Benning. We did pistol, carbine, a whole bunch of cool stuff, long gun even. And I asked him on the podcast, after years of teaching, years of competition, a grandmaster as a teenager, a accomplished trainer, and now a professional shooter for Sig Sauer, I said, last year in competition, how many times did you transition your vision, your focus from target to front sight? And his answer was once. Now remember, we're not talking about a guy who shoots in recreation. We're talking about a guy who does it for a living, who has won every competition last year that he competed in, including the NRA Nationals, which included the best shooters in the world in a myriad of different weapon systems. This is, I talk about behavioral scripting. That's exactly a good representation of that, because he could do the same thing he does with a pistol, with a shotgun, a carbine, a bow, whatever. He goes into competition, he destroys everybody. One target in 2019 that he shot and he transitioned his field of view. I said, what was that target? And he said it was a 27-yard, 6-inch pie plate And he did so because of the distance and because he had to make that count. So every single target outside of that target, he got target focus and he got alignment of the gun in the background of his vision. That should be important for you you should be going, oh, whoa, that's crazy. Because the next segue into this is, how do you accomplish that? When he started off as a teenager training, his mentor gave him a pistol, which I'm excited because we're thinking about doing, I really want to do a frangible round, which is an ammunition which you can shoot at steel at close proximity and it dissipates on the target, similar to what cowboy action shooters use. But I want to do a course where we take off your sights, or we tape your sights. Probably tape your sights, taking off would be stupid. Tape your sights during the whole course. So we teach you how to do this. His first mentor gave him a gun with no sights and said, until you become a grandmaster, which is like some Karate Kid shit, gave him the gun and said, until you become a grandmaster, you won't develop or grow. You will focus on becoming the best. I asked him, how would you train if you had one day to train? What drill would you do? He said he would take an IPSC target out to distance. He would take it out to 20 yards. He would take that IPSC target, he would take his pro timer, he would take his gun, he would load 5 rounds per iteration, and then he would, off the pro timer, draw his pistol and shoot 5 rounds quickly onto that target. 5 rounds at a time through 1,000 rounds. And then he would master narrowing those shots on that target from far distance. 20 yards is pretty far when it comes to this. That's incredible, because what he's doing is he's taking his furthest likely target in competition and he's honing his ability to dial it in, right? He's not starting with a close range target. He's starting with the furthest range target and working on grip, working on presentation, working on the fundamentals of I guess, competition here, and taking those shots. When I first experienced this type of tactic, I did so in warfare, where I discovered, when coming across people that had guns, that had different circumstances where I didn't have time to find that friend sight, that I was going to live, and I did so automatically by breaking the shot, by trusting my instincts and my alignment. And I did so without getting a block instruction on it. Nobody taught me in Special Forces. Nobody taught me outside of Special Operations as a professional gunfighter. Kevin actually, we talked about it recently, learned how to do that. I actually talked to Andy Sump as well. He learned how to do that early on in his career in specialized counterterrorism units. Hell, I've been in counterterrorism units that are really special, and we didn't even learn that. How do you do it? Well, the first thing you do is you practice hard focus. Hard focus is you looking at the target or the threat, which you're going to do anyway. Do you think you're going to run through your house and have a hard sight, front sight focus, and then walk around with a blurry background or blurry environment? That's not how this works. You're going to look at the environment looking for the threat. The gun's going to be in line with your eyes, tracking where your eyes are. And then when you identify the threat, you would think that because you understand marksmanship, you're going to transition, but you shouldn't. So we practice it by retaining that hard focus and aligning the pistol where my eyes should be. What I want you to do is, as practice, I want you to get hard focus on the target at 3 yards. Really close. There's no reason to stretch it out to 20 yards. We're starting off with developing our natural point of aim up close. Your natural point of aim is the alignment of your body position, your chest aligned or squared with target, and the positioning of your hands in relationship with your eyes. That all counts. I get hard focus on the target. I'm going to make a target, and on that target, I'm going to write a word on that target. I'm making this up as I go. I'm going to write a word on that target. Maybe it's Mike. And so it's going to be really small. It's like the 20/20 vision test. And so you have to be able to read the characters in focus in order to shoot and break that shot. But if you want to practice natural point of aim, what you do is you practice what right looks like in the background of your vision. Because maybe this doesn't look right, but maybe this looks right. The translation of what looks right is the accuracy in relationship to the target. So in developing my natural point of aim, I'm going to push and present the gun without using my sights and break the shot where I want it to be. So I'm going to put a pasty on this target, and I'm going to put characters above it, just like that whole test that I told you about, that vision test. Once you see in clear focus those characters, then you're going to break a shot on that small pasty. When you break a shot on that small pasty, if you miss off to the left, what you're going to do is adjust your position, the position of your hands, the position of your body. And then you're going to break another shot on extension and try to get clear focus of the characters, breaking the shot, and finding out what right looks like. Once you see the right alignment, because the rounds are impacting the pasty, then you're going to continue to rep that again and again and again and again. You're developing your natural point of aim. When you start with one target, you need to start with another target, because the transition is important, just as important. So now I have one word on one target, one word on another target. Finding the word, shooting the pasty. Finding the word, shooting the pasty. What I'm practicing is keeping my eyes target focused without transitioning off the bat. Because what typically happens is you put something in your field of vision, like a gun, in between you and the target, your eyes are going to want to hunt what that is, because it doesn't recognize it. That's why typically in marksmanship we teach that, but if you teach that enough, you're going to do it automatically. Now the evolution of this practice is, I don't want you to just continue to point shoot targets across the full spectrum of a potential gunfight with multiple assailants. Let's say you walk into a room, there's 3 bad guys. If your eyes naturally transition from target to front sight, then are you going to ignore that front sight and transition back out to the target? I would say no. Because when your eyes are upgrading the circumstance by aiming small, missing small, you have the advantage. You've already got a snapshot of the threats. You know how you're going to take them. But your eyes don't have enough time to catch up. But that doesn't mean you're going to lower your gun. Your eyes will catch up with the gun. Present the gun, see the word in focus, break the shot in alignment, and then continue to shoot. It also means you're not going to stop shooting. You ever see the videos of the cop drawing the gun in fear of his life and breaking the shots, multiple shots at a cadence, and he's freaking out and he hits nothing? That's what we want to avoid. The reason that happens is because in fight or flight, through his sympathetic nervous system activating the stress hormones, he's just breaking shots. He's just reacting and flinching. But we need to slow it down. And I don't mean physically slowing it down, I mean consciously slow it down. So I'm breaking that first shot off the natural point of aim, and then as I'm shooting, my eyes will find that front sight. Then I upgrade. I aim small, miss small. Maybe it's the V in my neck. Maybe it's the contrast between my nostril and my face. Maybe it's the right eye socket, because you need something definitive in the background to use as a point of reference. I think that tactic is super beneficial when you deliberately do it slow and you scale it up. Because what we have to do here is train our eyes, but also train our physical body. The reason I talked about the keeping the barrel in line and its benefits is because naturally, if you just push something and try to find something floating in the air like an optic, then that's going to take time. But if you trust your physical body to drive that weapon system with a barrel sitting next to your thumb, you don't have to overcomplicate it or overthink it. You can trust your line, break shots, and work through the process. I know this is deep stuff. I had 2 monsters, I chugged them, I'm sweating profusely. That's just part of it. But I wanted to talk to you guys about this because as you work through training, what I see the biggest mistake tacticians making and students making is not analyzing them. In my gunfighter pistol course, I have my students talk to their coaches and give feedback of what they imprinted in their mind consciously. So I want you to go, hey man, in that 5-shot string, yeah, I don't remember seeing anything, but I remember I shot. That second shot, I still didn't see anything. I saw it in the background of my vision, but I think I was aligned. That third shot, I started to pick up my front sight, and it felt better because I saw my eyes picking up that sight and getting in focus. And that 4th and 5th shot, yeah man, I had a blurry face behind it, and I think I put him right in the face. And then you check the target and you go, oh crap man, they were right where I needed to be. Here's a better idea. Take a piece of paper, which is a 8 by 10, 10 by 12, 8 by 10, whatever it is. A standard piece of paper. Turn it sideways. draw a circle about 3 inches large, and then write your name above that circle. My name's Mike, M-I-K-E, and then I'm going to draw that. I'm going to write small M-I-K-E. The characters need to be about an inch big. That's what she said. So you post that target on paper, and you back up far enough to where you have to see that in clear focus in order to see what it is. Even better, turn yourself away and have your buddy write something as a word to identify what that word is, so you can reflect on the follow through and regurgitating what that word is, because you were tuned in focus instead of hyper focused on the front sight or what was happening with the flinching of the gun. So Austin, he's a mouth breather, so he's going to write mouth breather. And I don't know, he wrote mouth breather. I'm going to turn, and it's funny because that circle is like the size of his mouth. I turn and I read the sign in clear focus, retaining that because I'm trying to cognitively imprint that, and I break the shots in a 5-shot string. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The last caveat to this is gun cycle. They go boom, 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 right? They do muzzle flip, recoil. We tend to microanalyze processes that we want to affect because we think we're better than everything mechanically in our lives, right? It's the mistake that race car drivers make when they're driving and they make an error. It's our mistake when we're shooting a 5-shot string in between shots 2 and 3. We think we see something in the background of our vision, or maybe in front sight focus, and we try to change it. And then that gives us bad results. If you have good alignment on the first shot, and you break that shot, and you trust the cycle of operation and let the gun do its job, where it muzzle flips, you retain a good solid grip and control that recoil, and it goes boom, lands flat in the same spot, boom, boom, lands flat in the same spot, you are going to get the results that you need because you're trusting and allowing that gun to do its work. If you don't analyze that process and you let it, you will see a group on that paper. Now, maybe your natural point of aim is off because it's to the left, but that just takes reacquisition and acquiring your body position, not with your eyes, with your physical body. Guys, I love talking about this because it's my passion, but I truly want you to get a sense of kind of the process that's going through my head when I teach, and how you should be thinking when you're learning and growing as somebody who's into preparedness and self-defense. If you just go out and you shoot targets and you feel empowered by that, that's all fine and dandy. But you should take the time to hard focus and concentrate on what you're doing, one shot at a time. Until next time, stay alert, stay alive. fieldcraftsurvival.com. Make sure you guys check out our YouTube channel at the Fieldcraft Survival page. Also our podcast, because it's just a source and reference for a whole bunch of information. Thank you so much, guys.